The World Health Organization is holding a meeting in Geneva today to agree a new strategy to tackle the outbreak of Ebola in West Africa. About 900 people have died in Sierra Leone, Liberia and Guinea. Delegates could declare a global emergency, then impose travel restrictions on countries affected.
That was 2014, at the height of the world's deadliest Ebola epidemic. The outbreak was eventually brought under control, but the second deadliest epidemic is still continuing in the Democratic Republic of Congo and gets much less news coverage. Michael Beasley, the Bishop of Hereford, has recently visited the DRC. In a previous life, he was an epidemiologist. He joins us now, as does David Gressly, the United Nations Ebola Response Coordinator, who's in Goma. Morning to you both.
Good morning.
Bishop, I suspect that this will strike some people as a rather unusual career trajectory. What were you doing in your previous life?
I worked with, alongside being ordained, I worked with a research organisation based in the Department of Infectious Disease Epidemiology at Imperial College in London.
And what did you learn on your recent trip?
I think what was good to see in DRC, working with the UN team and with the churches there, is the sense of a group of people working together constantly to learn in the face of a moving target, which is how to bring the outbreak under control. In the area affected, much of the health infrastructure is provided by churches. And there's very good cooperation there with respect to establishing Ebola treatment centres in hospitals run by the different denominations. It was really good to see in Kivu the way that churches have stepped up to put in place prevention measures at church. So in a number of churches we went to, our temperature was measured as we went in to make sure that we had no fever. But what was happening when I was there was to help churches think how they could seek to increase the engagement of the community in bringing the infection under control. So looking at what shapes their hearts and minds.
David Gressly, but before we talk further about those lessons that are being learned, is it fair to say that this outbreak has had less press attention and therefore less political attention? And is that a problem for you?
Well, I would say it probably has received less attention than the one in West Africa. However, I will say that there still seems to be a sufficient political will internationally to face this epidemic. We are getting the resources that we need for that, which is very necessary. But nonetheless, we're not there yet, and we need to keep reminding everyone that we need to get to zero and stay at 2-0. If we want to eliminate the disease here in the DRC. So it's an ongoing issue that we keep this everyone's attention on this epidemic.
And just turning to the points being made by the Bishop there, looking back to the experience of West Africa, is it fair to say that the value of asking the churches to play a role in all this took a bit of time to be appreciated in the last epidemic?
Well, I would say that the churches have always played a very strong role here in many different activities, and I think from our point of view, the UN point of view, the churches on the ground have been a critical player for the response in a land in which has been in conflict for the last 25 years, where government institutions are generally discredited. Churches do represent an institution that are highly respected and listened to. And as was described earlier by the Bishop, they provide services, health support, but also education. They're a central focal point for many communities. So they're a great avenue for trying to engage with communities because of that respect and support that they have provided to communities historically.
Bishop, you talked about lessons being learned. Is this something that's developed since the West African experience? Were people a little bit slow at that stage to pick up on how valuable the work of the churches might be?
Yes, I think what was striking in Kivu was all the time how all agencies and churches are getting better at responding to the epidemic. So, for example, with respect to the work that the churches were doing, it was to say, yes, there are, of course, medical responses that are necessary, but that's just one part of what's needed to bring Ebola under control. So we were looking at things, for example, like how to help a community move from a place of fear to a place of hope that there is a possibility of controlling Ebola. How to work with communities where there is rumour and misinformation taking place. How to put in place the right kind of measures to make sure that churches aren't adding to transmission. So how people are buried during the Ebola outbreak is very important. So how churches could do that well, and also how to care for people who've recovered.
And David Gressly, we probably should also just ask you to bring us up to date on what stage the struggle against the disease is at now. I mean, how soon do you think you will have it under control?
Well, we're at a good phase right now. I wouldn't say that we certainly can't declare victory, but we've had a number of days without a case. I think in the last 10 days, 7 days without a case. So we're definitely in a final phase. This could go on a little while longer, but I think we're increasingly optimistic we can bring this under control. And I do want to emphasize the key to that was the acceptance of communities of the response. It's not just a technical response. You have to have that acceptance to win.
With that thought, we must leave it. David Gressly and Bishop Beasley, thank you both very much indeed.